What's up, everybody? Axe Wizard here. Gonna do a rundown on how to set up version control with Godot, and we're gonna be using GitHub for our online repository. So what this is going to let you do is that if you're just a solo developer like myself, this will allow you to store your code like in the cloud. So if I go to my GitHub account here, you can see I've got my game here, and I have all of my code and art assets here. And if I need to, say if my computer dies or it gets, flood or stolen or whatever happens to it and I lost all my stuff, well, the whole project is up here on GitHub. And farther along, if you actually get to a part where you are, releasing your game, and depending on what type of game you're making, maybe it's a live service game or something like that requires, people to download updates and stuff like that for it. This also allows you to keep track of changes you've made to your code. So if for some reason you release an update that has a bug, and you can go through and find where that was, and you can roll back to a previous commit, and you can roll back to a previous stable build. So there's lots of things with version control. There's lots of nuances with it. I'm just going to go into simple stuff. So if you are just a solo developer just wanting to put your code on the cloud so you can keep it safe, I recommend doing this process. And on the later half of the video, I'll go into some things you can do if you are not the only developer working on a project. But yeah, so let's get into it. Let's look at the documentation. So what is version control? Version control allows you to, control the versions. It allows you to, it's sort of change management. It allows you to track what changes you make to your project. And the most popular version of version control is this system called Git. It's Git, Git. And the popular online repository that everyone uses is GitHub. Even Godot uses GitHub. So if you make an account with GitHub, it's free. So I already made my account. When you go to make your account, it'll just ask you, what do you want to use for your username? So since my channel is Axe Wizard Beards Games Guitars, I made my username Axe Wizard BGG. So I made that username. It'll ask you to put in your email, and then you'll type in you'll set up a password for it, just like any other account creation. They're going to send you a code to your email that you're going to have to enter in on the screen, and then after that, you're good to go. So again, GitHub is completely free, doesn't cost you anything. You can store all your code on there, and you can make your repository private. So since right now we're looking at my game Neurality 3092 that I'm working on, I have a whole devlog series on it. I want it to be private because I don't want people to be able to just steal my code off the internet. So I made it a private repository. If you're working on a public project that maybe you want to work with other people on, you can make it a public repository. Maybe you're making a helpful tool for the community or something like that. But for me, because I'm working on a game that I want to release as a full game one day, I want to actually, monetize it in a way. I charge like an upfront cost. I'm thinking like $5 or something like that. I want to make a little bit of money on it. I don't want people to just steal it. If they want to steal my code, they better at least watch my damn devlog series so I get some watch hours out of it. But yeah, so private repository. And when you go to set up your GitHub account, I think it asks you, it tries to get you to pay for it, but you just choose the free option and you'll be fine. So once you've got your GitHub account created, and let's go into setting up version control in Godot. So this process is going to work regardless of what version of Godot you're using. So if you're still using one of the old 3.x versions of Godot like I am, you haven't switched to the new 4.0 Godot that just released not too long ago, it'll still work. If you're using the new Godot, if you're using Godot 4, this is still going to work as well. So let's talk about what their documentation is. So they have a built-in thing where you can set up version control in Godot. Before we get into that though, they have this helpful stuff here. So this official Git plugin, and if you have a newer version of Godot, it's going to do a lot more for you. Even if you have an older version of Godot, I think 3.2 is the earliest that they started supporting it with a plugin. You're still going to be able to get some use out of it. So they have this handy thing here that says if you're using Git from inside the editor, supported with an official plugin, you can find latest releases here, and then documentation on how the Git plugin can be used can be found here. So this is really handy because this will take you to this page here. You'll notice that, hey, we're back on GitHub. This is the Godot engine, Godot Git plugin repository, and you can see that this is public, so we can access it. So this gives you instructions. Basically, you want to pick the instruction manual depending on your Godot version. So if you're not sure how to check what version of Godot you have, the easiest way is whenever you start Godot, it always opens up like a command prompt in the back. And if you look here, you can see that I am on version 3.4.4. I just haven't updated Godot in a while, and I'll probably update it when I finish my game. I don't really want to have any potential breaking changes from doing a engine update that I'll have to go through and fix all my code and stuff like that for. So I'm happy with where it's at right now. I'm just going to stick with it. So that's what I'm doing right now. So for me, 3.4, if you look here, I have to use this Git plugin version 1. If you're using 3.5 or 3.6, you'll have to use version 2. If you're using Godot version 4, you'll have to use version 3. Now, these are all fairly similar as far as the setup process, so I've looked through all of these. So if we go to the Git plugin v1 wiki here, it has a lot of the same instructions. It's just that with every version of the plugin, they add more features within the plugin that you can use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, in addition to setting it up, I'm going to show you how to use the command line so you can bypass that. If for some reason the plugin is not working, you can still use Git commands to actually push your code. So I'll go through a simple workflow if you're a solo developer, and I'll also go through a workflow if you're working with other developers on a project that you're collaborating on. So it says, so first thing is first, you got to install the Git. So you install that here. It even gives you a link. If we open this in a new tab, you can see it just gives us a standard website. It'll detect like what version you're on, so it detects that I'm on Windows. So just download the latest release. I've already done this, but I did take screenshots of the actual install process. So let me pull those up. So when you do the Git installer, it's going to ask you like where you want to save it. Just use the default directory. Next, it's going to ask you what do you want to use for your default editor. So in the event that Git needs you to edit a file or something like that on the fly, or maybe like edit a config file, you get to specify what editor you want to use. Now, by default, Git likes to use Vim. I hate Vim. If you've never used Vim before, you're lucky. It's pretty atrocious. Some people swear by it. I think it's just alien to me, so I don't like it. So I have Notepad++ installed. You can even just pick the normal Notepad if you're on Windows. Just pick whatever text editor you prefer, and then just hit next. Next, it's going to ask you for the name of the initial branch in new repository. So historically with Git, the main branch was called master. It was the master branch, but you know, over the years people have gotten wised up to the negative connotations of that word, and the developer community as a whole is transitioning from using master to main, which actually makes more sense anyway. So this just gives you an option to let Git decide. So currently it's still set to master, but it sounds like they're going to intend to change this to main in the future, or you can just override it now and just call it main. This is not a big deal. I just chose to override and then it just defaulted to main. So I would choose that option, but if you want to let Git decide, you can do that as well. Just if you choose this option, know that anytime I say main, I would be referring to master if you chose this option. But just for ease of use, I would pick this second option here. It'll make your life easier. So next it's going to ask, what do you want to do as far as adjusting your path environment? So if you were just using Git from the little command prompt it provides only, you would choose the first option. I highly recommend choosing the second option, which is the recommended option, because what this is going to do is this is going to set a path environment variable on your system that will allow third-party software such as the Godot plugin to access Git. And so just choose that middle option and you'll be fine. Next, it's going to ask you to choose the SSH executable. Just use the bundled one unless you know what you're doing and you already have some other external SSH exe that you prefer to use, then choose the other one. But if you're not even sure what this even is, you don't really need to be. Just choose the default top option. Next is going to ask you, what do you want to do for your HTTPS transport backend? I just picked use the Open SSL library. It was the default choice. You can also choose to use the native Windows Secure Channel library, but I don't need to leverage any of those things, so I just choose the top one. Next, it's going to ask you to configure your line endings. So this installer defaults to the top option, but I recommend choosing the second option, because if we go back to the documentation here, there's this working with Git on Windows section here. So I'm using Windows. If you're watching this, you might be using Windows. It might be a slightly different process for if you're using Linux or Mac. But for this, they want us to set this core.autocrlf. They want us to change it from true to input. So if you look at the installer here, this is what this second option is doing for us. So we can actually knock out two birds with one stone here if we just check this second option. So core.autocrlf is set to input, which is what we want according to their documentation. So choose that middle option and you'll be fine. Next, it's going to ask you what terminal emulator you want to use with Git Bash. I just chose the default top option, the use min tty. You can use the default Windows console window if you want, but it doesn't really matter. So just pick your preference. I prefer to use the min tty for Git. It's just because it comes with it. Why not? Next, it's going to ask you the default behavior of Git pull. Unless you know what you're doing, just leave it at default. Unless you have a specific reason for your setup that you need to choose rebase or only ever fast forward, just leave it at default. If you know what rebase and only fast forward does, you probably don't even need this video. So just leave it at default. Next, it's going to ask you to choose a credential helper. I just picked Git Credential Manager. It's what was defaulted there. You could choose to not use one. I don't know exactly what that does behind the scenes. I never looked into it. Anytime I've always installed Git, I've always just been told to use the Git Credential Manager. So that's what I do. So next, it's going to ask you to configure some extra options. This comes default with the top option checked, enable file system caching. I just left it that way. I don't think I needed anything to do with symbolic links, so I just left that unchecked, and then I just hit next. Next, it's going to ask you about enabling experimental support. I don't really want experimental stuff in my version control. That sounds dangerous, so I just left both of those unchecked, which they were default anyway, so they were defaulted to be unchecked, so I just left it. Then I hit install, and it goes through the install process, and then when you're done, you can hit finish. You can launch Git Bash if you like. We'll have to do that in a second or two, but yeah, so just hit finish, and then you have Git installed. So now that we have Git installed, you have to configure your username and email in Git. So what you have to do is you have to enter these into the terminal. So the easiest way to do that is if you don't have the terminal open already, you can just go to your search bar and just type in Git, Git, and use Git Bash. And this will bring open a little tiny command prompt for you. And what you can do is you can just type in that. So whatever you used for GitHub, you want to use here. So when it says username, you want, for me, mine was axwizardbgg. And then for email, you'll want to use whatever email you use for that. So if we do git config, if I can type today, that'd be fantastic. You can also copy and paste if you want to, user.name. And the username is in quotes, so I can do axe wizard bgg, and that'll set it. And then you'll also do the same for your email. It's just that the email will not be in quotations. So once you've got that set, you can close this window here. Now it's going to have you install the plugin from the Godot asset library. So what they do is they bring you to this download latest releases, which is going to take you to this releases page. And again, you're going to want to pick the version that you need. Godot's version 3.4 to 3.2 to 3.4. You're going to want the latest version of version 1. If you're using 3.5 or 3.6 for Godot, you're going to want version 2 of this plugin. If you're using Godot version 4, you're going to want to use version 3 of this plugin. So I'm going to scroll down until I find my version. So since I'm on 3.4, I need version 1. So I'm going to find the latest release of version 1. So here's version 2. Here we go, version 1.2.3. So once you find this, you scroll down to the bottom, there's a asset section, and you should be able to download the zip file here. Now, when you're going to download the zip and you're going to extract it. So for me, I actually downloaded the previous version 1.2.2 because I missed that one. But whatever version you download, you just want to right click it and extract all. So once you extract it, it should take you to this folder that has this Godot Git plugin here. And I think newer versions might have this add-ons folder built in, but what you want to do is you want to take this this Godot Git plugin folder and you want to copy that over to your project. I'll show you the easiest way to do that. So if you go into your project, so here I have my game open. If you right-click your resources folder here and you go to open in File Manager, this will bring it open in your File Manager. And if you have a add-ons folder, you're just going to copy and paste it right in there. If you don't have an add-ons folder, what you're going to do is you're going to just create a new folder. You can also do Control-Shift-N on Windows and just name it add-ons. But they require that you have to have the, in the root of your project, it has to be add-ons and then the Godot Git plugin and then all the other stuff that comes with it. So once you copy that over, you can proceed to the next step. So next it says open your project using the Godot project manager. So just open Godot. Now it's going to have you set it up. So when you go, when the project loads up, you're greeted with the Godot editor you know and love. However, you now have the option to set up a VCS plugin from the editor. So if you go to project, version control, and then set up version control. So we go here. So project, version control, set up version control. Now, this should detect that you're going to be using Git API. I think this is the only version control they currently support right now. So, but it's there. And then you can go to initialize. And on older versions, so on version 1 of the plugin, it's going to act like it didn't do anything. But once you hit initialize on it, it actually added a version control tab down here. And it also added a commit tab up here by your inspector. I think version 2 and up will actually bring up another window asking you to like enter in some details. If you want to see what that looks like, it should bring up the setup version control window. And then I think version 3 brings up a similar window. So version 3 brings up a similar window asking you to connect to your version control system. So version 1, the one I'm using, doesn't have that, but versions 2 and 3 do. So if you're using that, you might encounter that. You just want to use the same username, password that you use for GitHub. And I haven't had to mess with this yet. It might ask you for more information on that, but I haven't had to do this for myself. So now that we've done that, if in Godot we look at our commit, you can see I've got all these changes here. Now, if this is the first time you're setting it up, this should show your entire project as changes. So here, let me actually move myself out of the way here so you can see. Once you have these changes selected to be staged, you can hit stage selected. This stages them to be committed. And then once you're ready, you have all your changes staged, you can type in a commit message here. So initial commit of my project. And then you could hit commit changes here. And what that will do is that will commit it to the main branch of your project. But this doesn't actually send it to GitHub. I think version 2 and version 3 of the plugin will allow more stuff in the editor to be able to push your changes. But version 1 of the plugin doesn't let you do anything for that. So rather than using this, I switched to using the command line, because even if this doesn't work, and you can still do this for all of your projects regardless of what you're working on. And I have a handy list of commands here that you can run. So before we start running stuff, the best way to do this, I'm gonna get rid of this, and I'm not gonna, these should not be staged. So if you go in Godot, and again, you right click on your resource folder here, your project root, and you go to open in file manager. If you just right click on a random spot, you should have an option to open git bash here now that we have git installed. And this opens up that little command prompt set to this directory. It's important, if you're going to be using any git commands, you want to make sure that you open it up at your project root. That way it does things correctly. Otherwise, if you start running commands, it just either won't work, or worse, if it does work, it's going to break things. But so just open it and at the root of your directory, and you should be fine. So what we can do here is we can run a command called git status. And this just shows the current changes that we have to be committed. So if you're the first time you're doing this, you're going to see a whole lot of changes, but this is showing you exactly what it shows over here. It's just that it's showing you in a command line. So what's actually happening is that whenever you hit refresh, it's actually running this git status command for you. That's all it's doing. Now, if you want to stage these changes to be committed, if you want to stage every single change, you can do git add and then a period. A period tells Git to do everything. So if we do git add, boom, that's the equivalent of it being staged. Now, if you run git status again, you can see now that we have these changes to be committed. They're staged. They're now in green. That, again, that git add is just the same as doing stage selected here. So now what you're going to do is, if you want to commit it, you're going to do git commit -m. And in quotations, you're going to put a commit message. So for you, this might be the initial commit of my entire project. For me, since I've already done this, I just made a few changes to some ships. I'm just going to say fixed some node placement on some ships. So that'll be my commit message on what I did. So if I hit that, you can see I've got 3 files changed, 16 insertions, 10 deletions. So I tweaked a few things. Now, if you run git status again, it's gonna say nothing. Like you're on branch main, nothing to commit. Your working tree is clean. So that's the extent of what this does for you in the Godot plugin for version 1. For version 2 and 3, I think they allow you to actually push to your repository. But if you want to actually push to GitHub, what we have to do first is we have to go back into GitHub. And if you just hit the little GitHub icon up here, it'll take you back to the home page here. And you can hit new here to create a new repository. And this is where you'll just pick the name. So LOL my game, like whatever you want to call it. And then you can have a description if you want. You can set to, I would recommend setting it to be private if it's your own project. And then what you're going to do is you're going to skip the rest of these sections. So just do the name, set to private, and then create repository. So what this is going to do, I've already done this. So if I go back, I have this LOL my game repository that's empty right now. So this is so once you hit create, it's going to display this this screen here. That's going to give you some options here. The most important thing for you is this push to an existing repository from command line. So what this is going to do, this git remote add origin, this is going to tell Git that, hey, I want to set this remote origin. I want this to be my GitHub repository. And so whenever you push something, you can choose to push it to origin, which will be in the cloud. It'll be on GitHub. So what you want to do is you want to copy and paste this line, and you want to paste that into your command prompt, and then just hit enter. So I think you can right click and then hit paste, and it will let you do that. So just paste that in there, and then that should add that as your remote. And then if you want to actually push stuff to GitHub, all you have to do is do git push origin main. So once you've pushed it to main, you'll see it does a few things. Now, if I go back to my Neurality 3092, which is the repo I was working in, you can see that I had a commit 2 minutes ago that I just pushed now. So AxeWizard BGG fixed some node placement on some ships. So it shows your commit message, and in your list of stuff here, you can see that this was changed 2 minutes ago. So this is how you're gonna push stuff to your online repository. And this is fantastic because now that this stuff is pushed, if my computer blows up right now, I still have all my stuff on the cloud. So I can pull that project later on a new computer when I finally get one, or maybe I have an old replacement laptop, or maybe I'm desperate and I ask a buddy if I can come over and use their computer for a bit. You can still pull that code from the cloud. So as a solo developer, your workflow is going to look like this. So you're gonna be in Godot. You're going to be making whatever changes you want. If I hit this refresh now, this all goes away because I have nothing else to commit because I already committed and pushed it. But I think this will actually go away when you restart Godot. I think you have to go in a project and like set up version control every time if you want to use it through here. The plugin itself does a few things behind the scenes to help set up Git to work the way it wants to. So realistically, I only had to do this one time, and then from there, everything that I want to do, I'm just working in Godot like I normally would. And then when I'm ready to push changes to my online repository, I'm just right-clicking on my resource, opening in File Manager, right-clicking a blank spot, opening up Git Bash, and then I'm doing a Git status to see what changes I've got. I'm doing a Git add to stage those to be committed. Then I'm doing a Git commit to commit those, and then I'm pushing that change to my GitHub. So a look at that workflow is Git status to check changes. Git add period will add all changes to be staged. Git commit -m with your commit message in quotations, and then git push origin main to push it to GitHub. And if you're a solo developer and you're just working in your main branch all the time, this is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with it. And this simple workflow will get it so that as long as you keep remembering to do this, you'll be able to have all your stuff online. And in the future, if maybe your game starts getting bigger, maybe you hire more developers or you start working with friends on it, you already have version control set up. So what that means is that on GitHub, you could have them make GitHub users, and then you could give those users access to your project, and then that way they can actually pull code and start working on it too. Now, if you have multiple developers working on the same project, this is where version control shines, because it allows you to track everyone's changes. And the way that you're doing it right now as a solo developer, where you're just constantly committing and pushing to the main branch, is not going to be what you want to do when you're working with multiple people. if you're working with multiple people on a collaborative project, then the workflow changes a little bit. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to keep your main branch. That's like your point of truth. That's like what is your last stable progress. And you're going to want to branch off of that. So you're going to want to create a branch for whatever small task you are working on. So say if I go back into my game here and I go into my main script, this is where I kind of keep my own to-do list here. So say if I have research and fix the following bugs. Say if I'm going to research this clear scene function does not clear projectiles or selected target indicators. Say if I'm going to tackle this issue, I'll make a branch just to tackle this, and then I'll fix this bug, and then I will commit my changes to that new branch I made, and then I will also push that branch up to GitHub so that other people can look at it. So I'll show you what that looks like. So say, for example, if this was where the bug is, right? I'm going to make a change to this file. I made a change to this file. So say that thing I saved was actually the fix, and I want to commit that to my branch. So what I'm going to do is in my, I'm going to close one of these because I don't need all of these open, is in my terminal, which again, right-click resources, open in File Manager, File Explorer, and then right-click a empty spot. That way you're always working in your root directory for your project. So once you have that terminal open, what you can do is you can use the command git checkout with a -b, and this is going to create a new branch. And this is going to be, I'm going to name my branch, I'm just going to name it git demo. How about that? So I'm going to name my branch git demo. Like you could name it whatever you want. So if you're fixing a bug, you can call it something like, clear scene bug fix. If you're working with a lot of people, sometimes people might like to put like the date and timestamp of when the branch was created. It's up to you guys. So for me, I'm just going to create a new branch called git demo. So now what this has done is that I've switched to a new branch. So I'm no longer working on my main branch. I made a new branch off of main called git demo. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do git status. And you can see I have, I'm on branch git demo, and I have one modified file that's not staged. So if I want to stage it, I'll do git add. Again, similar workflow. Git status, you can see that now it is staged to be commit to this branch git demo. And I will git commit -m added comment on main.gd for demo purposes. Right, so this is the change that I made. So once I hit enter on that, that is now committed to git demo branch. So now if I want to push my branch to GitHub so that other developers can review it, I'll do git push origin and I'll do my actual branch name. So I'll do git demo. And what this will do is that this will push it up. And if I go back to GitHub, you can see it pops this up. Git demo has had recent pushes less than 1 minute ago. And so that's cool. So if we go to compare and pull requests, what this does is that this is going to set up a pull request to pull in your changes from this branch back into main. And so here you're going to put like, description of changes. And so I'll just do modified a comment, right? But if you were actually doing something where you actually fixed a bug, you would put, description of changes, what you had to do to fix that bug. You might also add like a section that determines how you tested that this bug was resolved. And then down here, it shows you an actual change of what you did. So you can see here, I added a line to this file, but whatever change you might do, this lets other developers see this change. And so what you can do is that you can create this pull request, And then the other developers that you're working with can do a code review on it for you. So you can copy this link and then send it to them, and they can come here and they can see, okay, so you modified a comment. Let me look at your files changed. And they can come here and then they can do a code review. So you can add comments to files by clicking on here. And then once you're done and you're happy with it, you can choose to comment, approve it. If it's good, you can request changes if you find problems with it. And then you could submit that review. Since I'm the only developer, I can't approve my own pull request that I created. So I just did this just for demonstration purposes if you are working with other developers. So once you have a pull request that is approved, then you can actually merge it. And what this does is this will merge in your changes back into the main branch. Boom. There we go. So it says pull request successfully merged and closed. We can delete this branch now. And if we go back to our code here, we can go look at main.gd, and you can see I added a comment on main.gd for demo purposes 2 minutes ago. And so this is another important thing. So now that I deleted that branch, I'm going to switch back to the main branch. So first things first, I'm actually going to close Godot, because this there's a comment on the documentation that so known issues, always close the editor before running git pull. Otherwise, you may lose data if you synchronize files while editor is open. So the only time you should ever have to use git pull is if you are pulling stuff from GitHub. So I'll show you why that's important. So let me close Godot. There we go. So now that I have Godot closed, what we want to do is we want to git checkout, and then we want to go back to main. So so checkout without any other flags is just going to switch us back to the main branch. So if I do git checkout main, now we've switched back to main. Now the problem is we've updated main on the cloud, but we haven't pulled in those changes from the cloud to be on our local system yet. So we're going to do git pull origin main. And what this is going to do is this is going to pull in that change that was merged in from my branch back to my main. So now that I've pulled main, I have an up-to-date starting place, and I can check out another branch if I want to. So this is like a very common workflow. Sometimes if you're working on a branch for a long time, you might need to actually pull main into that working branch before you merge the working branch back into main. So if you're working with other developers on stuff, lean on them as a resource. I probably shouldn't have even went into this for this video, because most people who are using Godot are probably hobby developers. But in the event that you are working in a team and you haven't really messed with Git before, I thought that there might be some useful information here. But again, for the most part, as a solo developer, your workflow is just going to be git status to check changes. You're going to be adding all of those changes to be staged, to be committed. You're going to commit them to your main branch, which you probably should still be on main, because we never changed branches here. And then you're going to push the change to your main branch, and that will push it out to GitHub. So that's your main workflow. If you are working with a team, there's some other commands here that you need to know. Git checkout -- and a file name will remove unstaged changes. So what I mean by that is it will revert the file back to when you made changes to it. So if I actually go into Godot and I make a change to a file and I want to revert that file back to how it was before I made changes, I can do that with this command. If I want to pull in current changes from a target branch into an existing branch. So this is where I was talking about earlier, where you might need to pull in main if you're working in a branch. So say if I do git checkout -b to create a new branch, and then I've been working in that branch for, maybe 2 weeks trying to narrow down this really annoying bug. And in the meantime, other developers have already merged several other changes into that main branch. I have to, before I can merge my branch back in, because my branch is like several commits behind. So I actually have to pull in changes from main into my branch, resolve any merge conflicts that might be there. Maybe another developer made a change in a file that I was working in, so I have to make sure that those work with my changes. Once everything is good, then I can put in that pull request to merge my changes back into main. So that's how multiple developers can work on that. So git pull origin allows you to pull from whatever is currently on GitHub, and you can pull whatever branch name. So typically you're probably going to be pulling main for the most part. If you want to see what changes you've made to a file within the console, you can do git diff, and you can do a file name, and it'll show you what changes you've made directly there in the console. So that's useful for if you're determining what changes you want to stage. You don't remember what you did to a specific file. You can just do a git diff right there in the console, and it'll show that for you. I think the newer plugins for Godot will actually show that on the bottom panel in the version control panel. It'll just show you that diff for you automatically whenever you have a file selected. If you want to switch to an existing branch, you just use git checkout and then the branch name. So checkout is used a few times. So checkout with -- will revert a file. Checkout without anything will just switch to a different branch. Checkout with a -b will make a new branch. So handy commands there. I figured I would include those so that way, people can get something out of it. But so that's how you do version control in Godot. And if you do it with the command prompt, it will work regardless of what version you're working in. And I think if you're, for some reason, using an even older version of Godot, you can still set it up using command prompt. So I hope that helps. And let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.